My name is Amelia, and I'm 28 years old. What should have been a celebration turned into the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. There I was, standing in my childhood home, birthday candles still flickering when my mother's words sliced through the air, "You make the family suffer." In that instant, years of suppressed pain crystallized into perfect clarity. I had spent my whole life trying to be enough for them. That night, I finally realized I only needed to be enough for myself. If you've ever felt the sting of family rejection, let me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and join me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother Jackson and younger sister Sophie was never easy. From an early age, our family dynamic was clear. Achievement was the only acceptable currency. Jackson, now 32, followed our parents' carefully mapped route to success, becoming a doctor, whose accolades were constantly paraded at family gatherings. Sophie, 24, was quickly following suit in business school, ambitious and driven in ways that made our parents beam with pride. My father, Thomas, was the quintessential corporate executive, his emotions locked away as securely as the files in his corner office. He measured worth in promotions and salary increases, viewing my artistic aspirations as a phase I would eventually outgrow. My mother, Diana, ran our home with the precision of a military commander, her perfectionism extending to every aspect of our lives, especially our career choices. Nothing less than excellence was tolerated, and unfortunately, excellence in her eyes never included artistic pursuits. Practical careers build stable lives. Amelia became her mantra whenever I mentioned my passion for art. Even as a child, my drawings were praised only when they won school competitions, never for the joy or expression they represented. This conditional approval followed me into adulthood, creating deep insecurities that I struggled to overcome. I had been making progress in my art career, slowly building a name for myself in local circles. For a brief shining moment, I had my own small corner in a shared gallery space. The validation of seeing my work displayed, of hearing strangers connect with my creative vision, had begun to heal the wounds of family disapproval. But then the gallery closed unexpectedly, a victim of rising rents and economic downturn. The timing couldn't have been worse. My apartment lease was ending, and without the income from gallery sales, I couldn't afford to renew. At 28, I found myself facing the humiliating prospect of moving back into my childhood bedroom, tail between my legs, confirming every doubt my family had ever expressed about my career choice. "It's temporary," I assured myself as I packed up my studio apartment, "just until I get back on my feet." I repeated this like a prayer as I drove to my parents' suburban home, the car filled with the remnants of my independent life. The reception was exactly as I expected. My mother opened the door with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said, taking in my packed car, "I suppose this was inevitable. Not 'welcome home' or 'it's going to be okay.' Just the confirmation that she had been right all along about my choices." My father barely looked up from his newspaper when I entered, offering only a cursory nod before returning to the financial section. Later that evening, I overheard him on the phone with Jackson, his voice animated in a way it never was with me. "Your sister's back home. Yes, the gallery didn't work out. I know we tried to tell her." The conversation stung, but it wasn't surprising. The first few weeks living at home were a study in silent judgment. Every morning as I searched job listings online, my mother would casually leave career change articles on the kitchen counter. "Marketing firms are always looking for creative people," she would say, emphasizing creative, as if it were a concession rather than a compliment. Sophie visited for Sunday dinners, her designer clothes and stories of business school achievements, serving as visual reminders of the path I hadn't taken. "My professor says I have the most promising business plan in the class," she would announce while our parents nodded approvingly. "It's all about making practical choices," she added, glancing meaningfully in my direction. Despite the daily reminders of my perceived failure, I continued pursuing my art, converting a corner of the basement into a makeshift studio. I applied to every gallery art program and creative position within a 50-mile radius. The rejections piled up, each one adding weight to my parents' unspoken, "I told you so." As my birthday approached, I decided to take control of the narrative. Instead of allowing them to treat me to the obligatory dinner out, where they would inevitably steer the conversation toward my career situation, I would cook my own birthday dinner. I would create a warm, festive atmosphere that might finally break through the wall of disappointment that had been built around me. I spent days planning the menu, selecting dishes that everyone loved. I used my dwindling savings to buy quality ingredients, decorations, and even small gifts for my family members, a gesture to show my gratitude despite our differences. Deep down, I hoped this effort would open a door to acceptance, or at least understanding. The day before my birthday, I overheard my mother on the phone with a family friend. "Yes, Amelia's still with us. No, nothing promising on the job front yet. Such a shame she has potential, but such impractical dreams." Her words reinforced what I already knew, but had been trying to deny. In their eyes, I was a disappointment, a cautionary tale, rather than a daughter finding her way. Still, I held on to hope as I prepared for my birthday dinner. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. Maybe over homemade pasta and my father's favorite wine, they would finally see me, not as the failure they had categorized me as, but as someone courageously pursuing her passion despite the obstacles. Looking back now, I realize how desperately I was clinging to a fantasy. But at that moment, hope was all I had. The day of my birthday arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. I woke early, my stomach fluttering with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. This dinner needed to be perfect. Perhaps then my family would see that creativity and attention to detail were valuable traits, even if they didn't lead to a corner office or medical degree. I spent the morning transforming our formal dining room, which was usually reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas, into a warm, inviting space. I arranged fresh flowers in the center of the table, used the good china that normally collected dust in the cabinet, and set out handwritten place cards with small personalized notes of appreciation for each family member. The afternoon was devoted to cooking. I prepared my father's favorite prime rib roasted to the exact medium rare he preferred. For my mother, I made the traditional potato gratin from my grandmother's recipe, one of the few dishes that ever earned her unqualified praise. Jackson's girlfriend Lauren was a vegetarian, so I created a mushroom Wellington as an alternative main course. Sophie loved anything with truffle, so the salad featured shaved truffle and a vinaigrette I had perfected during my brief stint working at an upscale restaurant. As I put the finishing touches on the dessert, individual molten chocolate cakes with homemade vanilla bean ice cream, I heard the front door open. My brother's booming voice filled the entryway, followed by the softer tones of a woman I assumed was Lauren. This would be my first time meeting her, and I was eager to make a good impression to show Jackson that despite my questionable life choices, I could be a welcoming sister. "Something smells amazing," Jackson called out as he entered the kitchen. He was as handsome as ever in his tailored blazer, the very image of success. Beside him stood Lauren, tall and elegant, with kind eyes that immediately put me at ease. "Happy birthday, little sis," he said, giving me a quick side hug, careful not to wrinkle his outfit. "This is Lauren." "Lauren, this is my sister, the artist." I noticed the slight emphasis on artist, as if it were an exotic occupation that required explanation. Still, I smiled warmly and extended my hand to Lauren. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Jackson speaks highly of you." "All good things, I hope," Lauren replied with a genuine smile. "And happy birthday, I brought a little something." She handed me a small, beautifully wrapped package. "It's nothing much, just a book of poetry I thought you might appreciate." I was touched by the thoughtfulness of a gift from someone who had never even met me. "Thank you, that's so kind." My parents arrived home shortly after, my father immediately loosening his tie and checking his phone for emails, my mother inspecting the dining room with a critical eye. "The table looks nice, Amelia," she said, which from her was high praise, "though I'm not sure why you went to all this trouble. We could have just gone to that new bistro downtown." "I wanted to do something special," I explained, "something personal." She nodded distantly, already moving on to greet Jackson and Lauren with much more enthusiasm than she had shown me. I watched as she embraced them both, exclaiming over Lauren's outfit and Jackson's recent mention in a medical journal. Sophie arrived last, fashionably late, as always bearing a bottle of expensive champagne and air kisses for everyone. "Happy birthday, sis," she said breezily. Though I'm not sure 28 is something to celebrate. Closer to 30 than 20 now. Despite the undercurrent of tension, the beginning of dinner went surprisingly well. The food was received with appreciation, and for a brief time, conversation flowed naturally around neutral topics. The unusually warm fall, a new restaurant that had opened downtown, a funny story from Jackson's hospital rounds. But as we moved from the main course to dessert, the familiar pattern began to emerge. My mother turned the conversation to Jackson's recent promotion. The youngest attending physician in the department's history, she announced proudly, raising her glass. "Always knew you were destined for greatness." Jackson had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but not enough to stop him from launching into a detailed account of his accomplishments and plans. Lauren watched him with obvious admiration, while my father nodded approvingly, finally putting his phone away to give his full attention. "And Sophie's business proposal has been selected as a finalist in the national competition," my mother continued, seamlessly shifting the spotlight to her other successful child. "Out of thousands of entries." Sophie straightened up, basking in the attention. "It's a new approach to sustainable fashion marketing," she explained, though no one had asked. "My professor says it could revolutionize the industry." I sat quietly serving dessert and topping up wine glasses, telling myself that it was fine, that this wasn't about me. But it was my birthday, and the complete lack of interest in my life or pursuits was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. As I placed the dessert in front of my mother, she finally turned her attention to me. "And what about you, Amelia? Any promising leads on the job front?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I took a deep breath. "Actually, I have an interview next week at an art education center. They're looking for someone to lead community workshops and manage their gallery space." The silence that followed was deafening. "Art education," my father repeated, as if I had said I was joining the circus. "It's a respected organization," I defended. "They do important work making art accessible to underserved communities." My mother's lips thinned into a tight line. "I assume the pay is minimal." "It's competitive for the field," I countered, feeling my cheeks flush, "and it includes health benefits." "Well, I suppose that's something," she conceded, in a tone that suggested it was barely anything at all. Jackson cleared his throat awkwardly. "You know, one of our hospital administrators mentioned they're looking for someone in their communications department. Probably pays better than art education." He stumbled slightly over the term. "Thanks," I said stiffly, "but I want to stay in my field." "Your field?" Sophie interjected with a little laugh. "Hasn't exactly been kind to you, though, has it? Maybe it's time to consider other options." "Like business school?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Not everyone wants the same thing, Sophie." "Obviously," she replied, gesturing around the dining room. "But some choices lead to independence, while others lead back to mom and dad's house." Her words stung precisely because they contained a kernel of truth. I was back at home dependent in a way I had never wanted to be, but her dismissal of my career, my passion, ignited a defensive fire. "I had a setback," I said firmly. "Everyone does. It doesn't mean I should abandon what I love." "Love doesn't pay the bills," my father interjected pragmatically. "At some point, adults make practical decisions." The implication that I wasn't behaving like an adult cut deep. I had been independent for years, had built a career against significant odds in a competitive field. One setback didn't negate all of that. As the conversation escalated, I noticed Lauren shifting uncomfortably in her seat. As the only outsider, she was witnessing our family dynamics with fresh eyes. And judging by her expression, she didn't like what she was seeing. The birthday gifts came next, each one revealing how little my family understood or valued my identity. My father gave me a self-help book titled Reimagining Your Career Path. My mother's gift was a gift card to a clothing store known for its business attire, with a note suggesting I might want to update my look for interviews. Sophie presented me with an expensive but impersonal scarf that was clearly more to her taste than mine. Only Jackson and Lauren's gift, a set of high-quality brushes I had mentioned wanting months ago, showed any recognition of who I actually was. I thanked them sincerely, fighting back tears at this small acknowledgement of my artistic identity. As we finished dessert, my mother's criticisms became more direct. "That outfit isn't doing you any favors for your figure." she commented, eyeing my favorite dress. And when was the last time you had your hair professionally cut? First impressions matter in job interviews. Each comment was like a paper cut, individually minor, but collectively painful. I had spent the day cooking and cleaning to create a special experience for everyone, and all I was receiving in return was criticism and judgment. Little did I know these small wounds were just the prelude to the devastating blow that would change everything. The tension in the room had been building all evening like pressure in a sealed container. My mother's critiques grew sharper, my father's disinterest more obvious, and my siblings' success stories more pointed. I tried to maintain my composure to not let them see how deeply their words were cutting. The thing about the arts, my father began in his lecture tone, swirling his after-dinner scotch, is that they're a luxury. In uncertain economic times, practical skills are what keep you employable. Dad, art isn't just a luxury, I countered, struggling to keep my voice even. It's essential to culture, to how we understand ourselves and our world. My mother scoffed. Culture doesn't help you become self-sufficient. You're almost 30, Amelia. When I was your age, I had a career, a marriage, and a child. Different times, Mom, and different goals, I replied. I'm building something meaningful, even if it doesn't fit your definition of success. Building, Sophie interjected with a raised eyebrow. From what I can see, you're starting over again. Jackson, perhaps sensing the conversation veering into dangerous territory, attempted to change the subject. The dessert is really fantastic, Amelia. You've always had a knack for baking. She does, Lauren agreed quickly. These cakes are restaurant quality. She could have been a pastry chef, my mother said with a sigh. At least that's a practical application of creativity. I gripped my napkin under the table. I don't want to be a pastry chef. I'm an artist. That's not just what I do, it's who I am. And where has that gotten you? My mother challenged. Back in your childhood bedroom at 28 with no stable income, no relationship prospects, and apparently no plan beyond more of the same struggling. I have plans, I insisted, feeling my voice rise despite my efforts to stay calm. The gallery closing wasn't my fault. The art market is tough right now, but I'm adapting. This interview next week could be a great opportunity. Until the next setback, my father muttered. Why are you all so determined to see me fail? I asked, looking around the table. Why can't you support me the way you support Jackson and Sophie? An uncomfortable silence fell. Lauren studied her plate intently, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Jackson shifted in his seat while Sophie examined her manicure with sudden interest. We want what's best for you, my mother finally said, her tone suggesting she was being extremely reasonable. Sometimes that means hearing hard truths. No, I countered, years of suppressed frustration finally breaking through. You want me to be who you think I should be. You've never tried to understand what actually makes me happy or fulfilled. Happy, my mother's voice rose sharply. You think struggling financially, moving home in your late 20s, and chasing pipe dreams leads to happiness? We raised you better than this, Amelia. You raised me to believe my worth was tied to conventional achievement, I said, tears threatening. Do you have any idea how damaging that is? Damaging. My mother's face flushed with anger. We gave you every advantage. Private art lessons when you showed interest. College tuition for a fine arts degree against our better judgment. Even letting you move back home when your choices led to financial instability. And this is how you repay us, with accusations. I'm grateful for the opportunities, I said, trying to dial back the confrontation. But support isn't just financial. It's emotional too. It's believing in someone even when their path is different from yours. My father set down his glass with a sharp click. This victim mentality isn't helping your situation, Amelia. Perhaps instead of blaming us for your challenges, you should consider that our advice comes from experience and wisdom. It's not victim mentality to want my family to respect my choices. I argued, fighting to keep my voice steady. Respect is earned, my mother snapped, and quite frankly, your choices haven't earned our respect. The words hit like a physical blow. I looked around the table hoping someone would defend me, but Jackson was staring at his plate, and Sophie was poorly concealing a satisfied smirk. Only Lauren looked genuinely uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I see, I said quietly. So no matter what I accomplish in my field, it will never be enough because it's not a field you value. Now you're being dramatic, my mother said dismissively. We just want you to be practical, self-sufficient. Is that so unreasonable? I was self-sufficient until 3 months ago, I reminded her. One setback doesn't erase years of independence. But it does highlight the instability of your chosen path, my father pointed out. That's all we're saying. The conversation was going in circles, each exchange driving the wedge deeper between us. I decided to make one last attempt at salvaging the evening. Standing up, I moved to clear the dessert plates. I appreciate your concern, I said, trying to sound conciliatory. But today, just for today, could we set aside the career discussion? It is my birthday after all. I thought it was a reasonable request, a small reprieve on what was supposed to be my special day. I was wrong. My mother's face hardened as she watched me stack the plates. Your birthday, she said coldly. Yes, let's talk about that. 28 years of investment of opportunities of support. And where are we? Right back where we started, with you under our roof, dependent and defensive. Mom, please, Jackson finally interjected. Maybe we could dial it back a bit. But she was beyond hearing him. Years of disapproval and disappointment had built to this moment, and something in her needed release. She stood up, her napkin falling forgotten to the floor. Do you have any idea the stress your situation puts on this family? The financial strain, the constant worry, the embarrassment when friends ask about you. And we have to explain yet another artistic setback. My chest tightened as if all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Each word was another brick in a wall being built between us, a wall I suddenly realized had foundations dating back to my childhood. I'm sorry my existence is such a burden to you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's not your existence, she fired back. It's your choices. Your stubborn insistence on this path that clearly isn't working. Your refusal to listen to reason. Her voice had risen to a shout, her composure completely abandoned. And then it happened, the moment that would change everything between us forever. You make the family suffer, she screamed, her face contorted with anger and frustration. Every time we think you're finally growing up, taking responsibility, you retreat back into this fantasy world where passion trumps practicality. Do you ever think about anyone but yourself? The dining room went completely silent. The only sound was my mother's heavy breathing as she stood there, hands braced on the table, glaring at me as if I were a stranger who had invaded her home rather than her daughter. I felt as if I'd been slapped. The physical sensation of shock was so intense that for a moment I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I just stood there, dessert plate still in my trembling hands, as her words echoed in my mind. You make the family suffer. In that moment, a lifetime of similar comments flashed through my memory. More subtle, perhaps, but carrying the same message my existence. My authentic self was a disappointment and a burden. Diana, my father said quietly, finally recognizing that a line had been crossed. But it was too late. Lauren was staring open-mouthed at my mother while Jackson looked horrified. Even Sophie seemed taken aback by the raw venom in our mother's voice. I carefully set down the stack of plates I was holding, afraid they would slip from my numb fingers. I see, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Thank you for clarifying how you feel. Amelia, Jackson started, but I raised a hand to stop him. No, it's good to know where I stand. I felt oddly calm, as if I were floating slightly outside my body. I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval while staying true to myself. I never realized those goals were fundamentally incompatible. My mother's anger seemed to be receding, replaced by the dawning realization of what she had said. I didn't mean, yes, you did, I interrupted softly. Maybe not so bluntly, but you meant it. I make the family suffer. My existence, my choices, my very identity is a source of suffering for you. I looked around at the faces of my family members, shocked, uncomfortable, but notably not contradicting my assessment. In that moment, I knew with perfect clarity what I needed to do. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the dining room, up the stairs, to my childhood bedroom. With mechanical precision, I pulled out my suitcase and began packing essential items: clothes, toiletries, my portfolio, my favorite brushes. I had no clear destination in mind, only the certainty that I could not spend another night in this house. I heard footsteps on the stairs, then a soft knock at the door. "Amelia." It was Jackson. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like?" I replied, continuing to pack. "I'm leaving." "Mom was out of line," he admitted, leaning against the doorframe. "But she's upset. She didn't mean it the way it sounded." I stopped and looked at him directly. "Yes, she did. And the fact that you're defending her tells me everything I need to know about where your loyalties lie." He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "It's not about loyalties. It's about family. Families fight, they say things they regret, but they don't just walk out. This isn't just a fight, Jackson. This is the culmination of a lifetime of being made to feel inadequate because I don't fit the mold." More footsteps on the stairs, and then my mother appeared behind Jackson. Her face composed once more, but her eyes betraying her agitation. "Amelia, you're overreacting," she said, her tone back to its usual controlled cadence. "Let's all calm down and discuss this rationally." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, zipping my suitcase closed. "You've made your feelings perfectly clear. I make the family suffer, so I'm removing the source of suffering." "Where will you go?" she asked, and I noticed her concern was tinged more with judgment than worry. "I'll figure it out," I said simply. "I always do, despite what you think I am capable of taking care of myself." I brushed past them both, carrying my suitcase downstairs. In the entryway, my father stood awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional scene unfolding in his orderly home. "This is unnecessary, Amelia," he said, falling back on practicality. "You're upset. We all are. Sleep on it, and things will look different in the morning." "No, Dad, they won't," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Some things once said can't be unsaid. Some revelations can't be unlearned." I looked back at the dining room where the remains of the birthday dinner I had so carefully prepared lay abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had created this gathering, hoping for connection, only to discover the true depth of our disconnection. Lauren approached me hesitantly. "I know we just met, but if you need a place to stay for a few days, I have a spare room." Her kindness from a virtual stranger contrasted sharply with my family's reaction. "Thank you," I said sincerely, "but I think I need to figure this out on my own." "At least let us help financially until you're settled." My father offered, always more comfortable with tangible support than emotional understanding. "No thanks," I replied. "I think we've established that my choices are the problem. I'll deal with the consequences of those choices myself." My mother stepped forward, her expression a complex mix of anger, frustration, and the first hints of doubt. "You're being childish running away like this." I met her gaze steadily. "No, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I'm making an adult decision. I'm choosing my own well-being over your approval. I'm choosing to be somewhere I'm valued, not tolerated." With those words, I turned and walked out the front door, closing it quietly behind me. No dramatic slam, no tearful goodbye, just the calm certainty that I was finally choosing myself. As I placed my suitcase in my car and drove away from my childhood home, I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. The digital clock on my dashboard read 10:47 p.m. as I pulled into the parking lot of the Moonlight Motel, a modest establishment on the outskirts of town. My hands were still shaking slightly as I checked in, the night manager barely glancing up from his paperback as he handed me a key to room 112. The room was basic but clean. A queen bed with a floral comforter, a small desk with a lamp, and a bathroom with towels that had been washed so many times they were almost transparent. It was nothing like the comfortable bedroom I had just left, but it offered something far more valuable: peace. I sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the evening replaying in my mind like a movie I couldn't stop. "You make the family suffer." 5 words that had shattered the carefully maintained illusion that I was a valued, if misunderstood, member of my family. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts and calls from Jackson, primarily a few from my father, noticeably none from my mother. I silenced it and placed it face down on the nightstand. Whatever they had to say could wait until I had processed my own thoughts and feelings. That first night alone was both terrifying and liberating. I cried until no more tears would come, then stared at the ceiling, mentally cataloging my resources and options. I had about $3,000 in savings, my car was paid off, and I had my talent and education. It wasn't much to restart a life, but people had built from less. In the morning, I called the one person I knew would understand, Taylor, my friend from art school who had always seen and appreciated me for exactly who I was. When I explained what had happened, she didn't hesitate. "Come stay with me," she insisted. "My couch is yours for as long as you need it." 2 hours later, I was pulling into the driveway of Taylor's small bungalow on the artistic side of town. She greeted me with a fierce hug and no judgment, helping me carry my meager belongings inside. "I can't believe they treated you like that," she said, as we sat at her kitchen table, mugs of tea growing cold between us. "Actually, scratch that. I can believe it." I remember how they acted at our graduation. She was referring to the way my parents had barely acknowledged my summa cum laude honors in fine arts, instead spending the day questioning why I hadn't considered a double major in something practical. I kept thinking it would change, I admitted. That eventually, if I was successful enough on my own terms, they would come around. Taylor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Their inability to see your worth has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with their own narrow definition of success." Living with Taylor was a crash course in rebuilding. During the day, I took whatever work I could find, waiting tables at a cafe, teaching evening art classes at a community center, even helping a local business redesign their logo and marketing materials. The pay was minimal, but each small job helped me rebuild my financial independence. At night, I worked on my art, converting a corner of Taylor's living room into a makeshift studio. Something had shifted in my creative expression. The pain of rejection had opened a wellspring of emotional depth in my work that hadn't been there before. My paintings became more raw, more honest, exploring themes of identity, belonging, and the search for authentic connection. 2 weeks after leaving my parents' home, I finally checked my messages. There were dozens, ranging from Jackson's concerned, "Please let us know you're safe," to my father's awkward attempts at reconciliation. "Your mother was stressed. Let's discuss this rationally." My mother's lone text was characteristically self-centered. "When you're done with this dramatic episode, we can talk about a path forward." None of them acknowledged the fundamental issue, that they had never accepted or valued me for who I was. Their concern was superficial, focused more on the disruption to the family system than on my well-being or the hurt they had caused. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I used the money I'd saved from my various jobs to begin therapy with Dr. Martinez, a compassionate counselor who specialized in family trauma. "What you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect," she explained during our third session. "Your achievements and identity were consistently devalued because they didn't align with your family's expectations. But they provided for me," I countered, still struggling with guilt over my departure. "They paid for college, for art lessons." "Material support without emotional validation is like watering a plant, but keeping it in the dark," Dr. Martinez replied. "Yes, they provided resources, but they withheld the acceptance and recognition that every child needs." Through these sessions, I began to understand that my family's treatment wasn't something I had earned or deserved. It was a reflection of their limitations, not mine. This realization was both painful and freeing. As the weeks turned into months, I established a new routine. My various jobs provided enough income to contribute to Taylor's household expenses, while still saving a small amount. I continued therapy, gradually unpacking years of internalized criticism and self-doubt. And I painted, pouring my journey into vibrant canvases that captured both pain and resilience. 3 months after my birthday, a significant opportunity emerged from an unexpected place. I had been displaying a few small pieces on the wall of the Hideaway, a local coffee shop where I occasionally picked up barista shifts. One afternoon, a man named Marcus lingered in front of my work long after finishing his latte. "These are remarkable," he said when I approached to clear his cup. "The emotional depth is palpable." I thanked him, assuming it was just a casual compliment, but he handed me his business card. "Marcus Chen, Gallery Director, New Perspectives Art Space." "We're putting together an exhibition on family dynamics and identity for next month," he explained. "Your work would be perfect. Would you be interested in submitting some pieces for consideration?" It felt like the universe was offering a sign that I was on the right path, that choosing myself hadn't been a mistake, but the catalyst for growth. I agreed immediately, my mind already racing with ideas for new pieces that would tell my story. The following weeks were a blur of creativity and purpose. I cut back on my other jobs, using my savings to buy quality canvases and paints. Taylor cheered me on, helping me photograph my portfolio for the formal submission, and offering honest feedback as I created new work specifically for the exhibition theme. When the email came confirming that 5 of my pieces had been selected, I cried, not from sadness this time, but from vindication. Someone in the art world, someone who mattered professionally, saw value in exactly the type of expression my family had dismissed. Around this time, I also connected with Zoe, a photographer looking for a roommate to share a 2-bedroom apartment above a bookstore downtown. The space was perfect, affordable, full of natural light, and with enough room for a proper studio corner. Moving in with her marked another step toward rebuilding my independent life. 6 months after walking out of my parents' house, I had a roommate I enjoyed, a therapist who helped me navigate my healing, a circle of supportive friends, and my first significant exhibition opportunity. I still avoided direct contact with my family, though Jackson's texts had become more thoughtful, less focused on reconciliation, and more on genuine concern for my well-being. I wasn't ready to let them back into my life, but I was beginning to understand that healing didn't require their acknowledgement or apology. It required my own recognition of my worth, independent of their validation. And slowly, day by day, I was finding that worth reflected back to me in my art, in my new relationships, and in the quiet moments when I could finally look in the mirror and feel proud of the person looking back. The night before the exhibition opening, as I stood in my new apartment, surveying the journey of the past 6 months, I realized something profound. My mother's cruel words, "You make the family suffer," had been the key that unlocked my prison. In trying to wound me, she had inadvertently set me free. The night of the exhibition arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. New Perspectives art space was smaller than the prestigious downtown galleries, but it had a reputation for launching emerging artists with unique voices. The fact that my work would be displayed alongside established artists felt like validation of everything I had been working toward. I arrived early to help with the final arrangements, my heart racing as I saw my pieces, now professionally framed and lit, hanging on the pristine white walls. The collection I had created, titled simply Family Frames, told the story of my journey through abstract representations of emotional landscapes. Each canvas captured a different stage: the suffocation of unmet expectations, the shattering moment of rejection, the disorienting aftermath, and finally the tentative emergence of a self defined by internal values rather than external approval. "These are even more powerful in this setting," Marcus commented, adjusting the lighting on my centerpiece, a large canvas dominated by fractured shapes in red and black, with a small, luminous gold form breaking through the chaos. "There's an authenticity here that resonates with viewers. It's not just technique, it's truth." His words warmed me in a way that my family's approval never had, because his appreciation was for the very aspects of myself they had rejected. My emotional honesty, my artistic vision, my willingness to explore uncomfortable truths. As 7 o'clock approached, the gallery began to fill with attendees: art enthusiasts, collectors, local critics, and supporters of the other featured artists circulated through the space, glasses of wine in hand, engaging in animated discussions about the works on display. I stood near my section, alternating between pride when visitors spent time with my paintings and insecurity when they passed by with only a cursory glance. "The vulnerability in these pieces is striking," commented an older woman wearing an elaborate Art Deco necklace. "You've managed to make very personal pain universally accessible. That's no small feat." I thanked her, explaining a little about my process and inspiration, without revealing the full personal story behind the work. As we talked, I noticed a local art critic from the city paper making notes in front of my collection, his expression thoughtful. The evening was progressing better than I could have hoped. Several pieces had red sold dots placed discreetly beside them, and Marcus had introduced me to a few collectors, who expressed interest in seeing more of my work. I was engaged in conversation with a fellow artist when a familiar voice behind me made my blood run cold. Amelia. I turned slowly to find my entire family standing there. My mother, father, Jackson, and Sophie. They looked out of place among the bohemian art crowd, my father uncomfortable in his business casual attire, my mother's face set in an expression I couldn't quite read. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely audible above the gallery chatter. "Jackson saw the exhibition announcement online," my father explained. We wanted to see your work." I glanced at Jackson, who offered a small, encouraging smile. Lauren stood beside him, her presence somehow reassuring. "I need some air," I said, moving toward the gallery's small courtyard. To my dismay, they followed. In the relative quiet of the outdoor space, we faced each other awkwardly. 6 months of silence stretched between us like an unbridgeable chasm. "Your paintings are intense," my mother finally said. "Very emotional." "That's the point of art," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "To evoke emotion." "Amelia," my father interjected, "we didn't come here to criticize. We came because—" He trailed off clearly, uncomfortable with emotional declarations. "Because we owe you an apology," my mother finished, surprising me. What I said that night was unforgivable. I studied her face, looking for the sincerity behind the words. "Why now it's been 6 months?" "Because seeing your work tonight," she gestured toward the gallery, "it made us realize what we've been missing, what we've been blind to." "It took seeing my success to value my work," I challenged. "That's exactly the problem. My worth to you has always been tied to external validation." My mother flinched, but didn't deny it. "You're right," she admitted. "And that's on us, not you." Jackson stepped forward. "I should have stood up for you more," he said quietly. "I've always admired your courage to pursue what you love even when it was hard. I was just too cowardly to say it when it mattered." Sophie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "Your paintings made me uncomfortable," she admitted, "because they made me question my own choices. I've been following the path of least resistance, doing what was expected. You've been braver than I ever was." Their words should have been healing, should have filled the void I'd carried for so long. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of vindication and anger. Why did it take public success for them to see value in my choices? Why wasn't my happiness and fulfillment enough? "I appreciate you coming," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure what you want from me now." "We want to be part of your life again," my father said. "We want to make amends." I looked at each of them, my mother's hopeful expression, my father's awkward sincerity, Jackson's genuine remorse, Sophie's newfound respect. They were trying in their limited way to bridge the gap they had created. But bridges can't be built overnight, especially when the foundations have been eroded by years of conditional love. "I need time," I told them honestly. What happened at my birthday wasn't just about one comment. It was the culmination of a lifetime of feeling like I wasn't enough unless I conformed to your expectations. "We understand," Jackson said before my mother could respond. "We just wanted you to know that we're here when you're ready." As they turned to leave, my mother paused. "Your work is remarkable, Amelia," she said softly. "I wish I had seen that sooner. Not just the talent, but the courage it takes to express yourself so honestly." It was perhaps the first genuine compliment she had ever given my art, one not qualified by suggestions for improvement or comparisons to more practical pursuits. The irony that it came now, after I had stopped seeking her approval, wasn't lost on me. After they left, I returned to the gallery feeling strangely lighter. Their appearance and awkward apologies hadn't magically healed the wound, but they had acknowledged its existence. A first step, however small. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. When the final guest departed, and we began the cleanup, Marcus approached me with a smile. "Successful night," he said. 3 of your pieces sold, and the critic from the Times seemed very impressed. But I have to ask, who were those people? The ones who seemed to upset you? My family, I replied simply. He nodded, understanding. Ah, the inspiration for your work, I'm guessing. Complicated. Very. Well, he said, sometimes the most difficult relationships produce the most powerful art. And based on tonight's response, you've transformed that pain into something extraordinary. As I helped stack chairs and gather empty glasses, I reflected on his words. The hurt inflicted by my family had indeed fueled my creative breakthrough. Their rejection had forced me to look inward to find validation from within rather than without. In pushing me away, they had inadvertently pushed me toward my authentic self. Later that night, as I returned to the apartment I now shared with Zoe, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with my family's appearance or the commercial success of the exhibition. I had proven to myself that I could build a life aligned with my values, surrounded by people who appreciated me for exactly who I was. I had transformed my mother's cruel words, "You make the family suffer," from a weapon that wounded me into a catalyst that freed me. The journey wasn't over. True healing rarely follows a neat linear path. But for the first time since that fateful birthday dinner, I was genuinely grateful for the rupture it had caused. Sometimes it takes breaking apart to discover the strength to rebuild something better. 6 months after the exhibition, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined on that painful birthday night. The success of Family Frames had led to regular showings at New Perspectives, and 2 other galleries in the city had approached me about displaying my work. I was no longer waiting tables or picking up random design jobs. My art was finally providing a modest but sustainable income. My new apartment, a sunlit 1-bedroom in an artist-friendly neighborhood, reflected my growing stability. It wasn't luxurious, but it was entirely mine, decorated with pieces that brought me joy and inspired creativity. The living room doubled as a studio, with an easel positioned to catch the northern light, and shelves lined with art books and supplies. Therapy with Dr. Martinez continued, though we had reduced our sessions to twice monthly. The raw wound of family rejection had gradually scarred over, not erased, but no longer acutely painful. We had shifted our focus from processing trauma to building resilience and defining success on my own terms. Healing isn't about forgetting the hurt, she reminded me during a recent session. It's about integrating it into your story without letting it define you. This wisdom guided my cautious reconnection with my family. After the gallery opening, I had maintained limited contact. Occasional text messages with Jackson, a brief coffee meeting with my father, carefully worded emails with my mother. Each interaction was measured, protected by the boundaries I had learned to establish. The dynamic had shifted subtly but significantly. Where once I had desperately sought their approval, I now approached our relationship from a position of self-assurance. Their opinions, while no longer devastating, were also no longer definitive. I had found other sources of validation: my artistic community, my therapist, my friends, and most importantly, myself. My mother had begun her own therapy, a development that shocked the entire family. "I'm trying to understand why I put so much pressure on you all," she admitted during our first phone call after months of silence. "Why I couldn't see the value in your choices." While I appreciated her efforts, I remained cautious. Decades of conditional love couldn't be undone by a few months of self-reflection. Still, it was more than I had ever expected from her. My father, in his characteristically awkward way, had attempted to connect with my artistic world. He sent articles about successful artists and the business side of galleries, still approaching creativity through the lens of practicality, but making an effort nonetheless. Jackson and I had rebuilt something closer to a genuine sibling relationship. He had visited my new apartment, admired my work without the filter of family dynamics, and shared his own growing disillusionment with the pressure cooker environment of hospital medicine. "I never questioned the path laid out for me," he confessed during one visit. "Watching you break away made me realize I had choices too." Sophie remained the most distant, her competitive nature still creating barriers between us. But even she had shown small signs of growth, sending a thoughtful card when one of my pieces was featured in a local arts magazine. As Thanksgiving approached, I faced a significant decision. My parents had extended a careful invitation to dinner, framing it as a casual gathering, rather than a demand for reconciliation. Part of me wanted to accept to test whether the changes they professed were genuine. Another part feared being pulled back into old patterns, losing the hard-won independence I had established. After discussing it with Dr. Martinez, I made my decision. I declined the family dinner, choosing instead to host a Friendsgiving with the supportive circle I had built, Taylor, Zoe Marcus, and others who had been there during my darkest moments. I'm not ready for a full family holiday, I explained to my mother over the phone, bracing for disappointment or anger. To my surprise, she responded with understanding. That makes sense, Amelia. Perhaps we could meet for coffee the following weekend instead. Something smaller, less loaded with expectations. This small acknowledgement of my boundaries represented more growth than she had shown in the previous 28 years of my life. The Friendsgiving celebration was everything family gatherings had never been. Relaxed, supportive, filled with genuine appreciation for each person's unique contributions. As we sat around my modest dining table sharing dishes that reflected our diverse backgrounds and preferences, I felt a profound sense of belonging. To chosen family, Taylor toasted, raising her glass. The people who see us for who we are, not who they want us to be. The words resonated deeply. In losing what I thought was essential, my biological family's approval, I had gained something far more valuable, the freedom to build connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. A week later, I met my mother at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. The conversation was tentative at first, both of us careful to avoid triggering old wounds. But as the afternoon progressed, something unexpected happened. For perhaps the first time, we truly listened to each other. I always thought I was protecting you, she admitted, stirring her tea absently. Pushing you toward security because I was afraid of seeing you struggle. But everyone struggles, Mom, I replied gently. The question is whether we're struggling for something meaningful to us or something meaningful to someone else. She nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. It's not easy to unlearn a lifetime of thinking there's only one path to happiness. No, I agreed. It's not easy for any of us. As we parted ways, she hesitated, then pulled me into a brief hug. I'm proud of you, she said quietly, not because of your success, but because of your courage. It took losing you to realize what we had been doing to you all those years. The words didn't magically heal everything between us. Real reconciliation, if it was possible, would take years of consistent effort on both sides. But they acknowledged a truth that had been denied for too long, that the problem had never been my choices, but their inability to accept them. In the months that followed, I continued building my career and nurturing my newfound sense of self-worth. The pain of that birthday night had transformed from an open wound to a defining moment of liberation, the catalyst that forced me to choose my own path unequivocally. I also began sharing my experience through art therapy workshops for others healing from family trauma. Using creative expression to process pain became not just my personal healing journey, but a way to help others find their voice and value. On my 29th birthday, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I sat alone in my apartment reflecting on the journey. I had lost the fantasy of unconditional family support, but gained an authentic understanding of my own worth. I had traded the comfort of conformity for the freedom of self-determination. And most importantly, I had discovered that sometimes walking away is not an ending, but a beginning. The words that had once cut so deeply, "You make the family suffer," no longer held power over me. In their place was a new understanding that the only suffering had come from trying to be someone I wasn't, from accepting conditional love as the best I could hope for. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I celebrate not just another year of life, but a year of living truthfully. The path hasn't been easy, but it has been mine, and that makes all the difference." As I look back on this journey, I wonder how many of you have faced similar crossroads in your own lives. Have you ever had to choose between someone else's expectations and your own authentic path? Did you stay or did you walk away? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join our community of people, choosing authenticity over approval. Remember, sometimes the most painful moments become our greatest catalysts for growth. Thank you for sharing this journey with me, and I wish you the courage to honor your truth, whatever it may be.